This reminds me of my first experience in radio. It was back in the early 80s.
People with disability and mental health.
There's always controversy with us.
The mysteries of the mind and consciousness.
And we might get to the bottom of something, or we might start something new.
We're going to run the gamut and we're going to have a good time.
Waking Braves. No, not Waking Braves. We're Breaking Waves.
Breaking waves?
Breaking waves.
Breaking waves!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back.
You're listening to Breaking Waves, and I'm Riley.
And I'm John.
And today we are bringing you a show on the topic of simplicity.
Simplex.
Keep it simple, stupid.
Well, I've heard that one before.
Now, it's an interesting one, simplicity, because to call someone simple can be used to denote their sort of stupidity or their inferiority. But then at the same time, simple things can be venerated as it's the simple things in life that make it worth living, or the aspiration to create a more simple life because that will be easier and less full of strife.
So, as a word, it can be used as a noun or as a verb. So you can describe things as being simple, or people as being simple, or that some process is simple.
Yeah. And you brought to my attention the one I hadn't heard of before, the medical idea, the technical term for when something is
Well, that's
on its own.
Yeah, that's old school, and I'd never heard of it before, but I only came across that because I was looking for other uses of the word, but besides the ones we're used to, right, referring to a person or a process. And there's lots of, it's a bit of a curly word. We use it a lot, but we kind of use it in lots of different ways.
When you were a kid, John, did people ever call you simple? I'm sorry.
They may have thought I was simple. Quite possibly. I wasn't one to make a lot of noise. I was one to sit back and look. So you actually often get categorised as being dumb, stupid, or simple if you don't make a bit of noise.
Yeah.
If you don't make your presence felt, or you don't communicate.
That's interesting.
So perhaps I was perceived as being a bit simple.
And people complicate things with words.
Well, we complicate everything with words. And as we found out in our little journey on Breaking Waves, looking at these concepts and words, is that they're always changing them. You're trying to actually pin down the exact meaning of any of these words is quite difficult, often.
How would you define a simple life? What would you say that is?
Well, that's one way it's often used, isn't it? He leads a simple life, or he's, I don't know, what would that mean? It could mean a whole lot of things.
Well, I remember something you have said in the past about how when people lead very dysfunctional or chaotic social lives.
Chaos.
And so this can mean like things like double booking or making heaps of saying yes to different things that happen at the same time, and then staying up late at night before you have other responsibilities or things like this.
Here's something I've noticed about people who seem a bit chaotic like that, is that sometimes complicating things is a way of avoiding addressing the simple nature of something or some situation. Certainly in recovery from a crazed mental state often requires the simplification of one's thoughts. I'm thinking of some of the people that live around me, and their life seems crazy and chaotic, and it seems to enable them to keep going with their self-destructive behaviour. It's like a way of escaping or avoiding ever having to face everything, is to be completely confused all the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I suppose that when things are more simplified, then that avoidance is more difficult. And so,
Yeah, sometimes, sometimes writing stuff down is a great way of simplifying your thoughts. We can get overwhelmed with the Hegelian dialectic or with the internal dialogue and, having conversations with ourselves and trying to work things out and analyse and overanalyse to the point where you just become totally confused. It's quite often good to step back and try and simplify. It's not always easy to do.
the idea of a simple person, like, say, if someone is described as, oh, he's a simple man, the kind of image that would conjure up to me would be of someone who is perhaps like easily satisfied in life. And it's a bit like the idea of the guy that, has a few beers and watches the sports game and isn't prone to tormented introspection or abstract philosophizing and these kind of things.
Well, of course, I'm told that there are people who don't ever think very deeply about anything very much. So I suppose on that level, you could cruise along and never really. That would kind of like be a negative take on simplicity.
Well, does it have to be? Because I know in that Kurt Cobain clip, he said he was envious of these kind of people.
Sure, the grass is always greener. You imagine what it's like for other people, right? You try and work it out. What is it that, how come these people are so, why is that person so happy, Is it because their life is simple? Perhaps not the case at all. I was just, you asked me about a simple man. I don't know. The first thing I think of is a guy that has simple needs and simple desires.
Yeah.
It's not, but what does that actually mean? Like, does it actually mean a guy who's comfortable with his own time and doesn't need a lot of external things to?
Yeah, I think it could speak to that, because certainly the idea of a person being more complicated or so-and-so is complicated, a lot of the time that does go hand in hand with having these kind of high-level emotional needs that are extremely difficult to satisfy because of the checklist of requirements that comes along with them being unrealistic or unattainable.
It is a tool I use though quite a lot. It's something that I did learn, recovering from a bad stage of my life, and I reached out and got some help trying to arrange my thoughts. And there's a wonderful tool when you realise that all the confusion and cluttered thinking can sometimes be an impediment, the thing that's holding you back from getting anywhere. But it's it's one thing to be, for someone to suggest that, and another thing to be able to do it.
John, you've often remarked upon the fact that most media that we get, whether it's through entertainment or instruction manuals or news media, things like this, but you draw attention to the fact that most things are pitched at a level for that even a child could understand.
12-year-old.
There you go.
It's about a 12-year-old. Language, grammar, the choice of words. It's a very small lexicon of words that are generally used in media. Say, for example, the news. If you look at the language that they use in news broadcasts, it's not. It's pitched at the mental age of children, basically. So they don't really challenge us very much.
Yes, and I have heard tell that the vocabulary is diminishing as the generations go on, and I think that when you'll go back and read letters that soldiers in World War I wrote to their wives, and you'll find there's perhaps more of a command or more complexity in the usage of the language to convey more.
So if we look at Merriam-Webster, the uses for the word simple when it applies to a person can mean a lot of things. Simple, foolish, silly, fatuous and asinine. Different kinds of simple. Simple implies a degree of intelligence, inadequate to cope with anything complex involving mental effort. That would be one kind of simple. A simple person, it's like a dummy, right?
Simple Jack.
Then we got the fool. Now, who could also be described as a simple person. Foolishness implies a character of being seemingly unable to use judgment or discretion or good sense. A foolish person has no good sense. Now, silly person is another kind of simpleton. Silly suggests failure to act as a rational being, especially by ridiculous behaviour, silly antics. Now, a fatuous person, a fatuous simpleton, implies foolishness, inanity, and disregard for reality. Fatuous. Asinine. Asinine suggests utter, contemptible failure to use normal rationality or perception.
There you go. All fun words and all in the same family of simpletons.
So the etymology of simple, Middle English, from Anglo-French, and from medieval Latin, simplus, alteration of Latin simplic or simplex is the singular, having one ingredient, plain. It looks like it's been used for a long time. Some phrases for the simple reason.
That's interesting.
Keep it simple, pure and simple, which is a cooking oil. A simple equation, mathematics. A simple machine. Simple sugar. So there are lots of different kinds of sugar. No easy simple matter. A simple closed curve. A simple interest. Simple protein. Now, I do know that there's, in genetics, there's some kind of simple situation in genetics to do with chromosomes or something. Free from complexity or difficulty.
Yeah, that fits.
Easily treated or cured. Controlled by a single gene. There you go, there's a genetic one.
So a simple solution.
Relating to or being an epithelium. I don't know what that is. In which the cells are arranged in a single layer. Obviously, some kind of
Genetic.
biological thing. As an adjective, simple kidnapping.
A simple kidnapping. Yeah. It's a
What
random
is
one
that?
to
Like,
throw
what's a
in there.
non-simple kidnapping?
I don't know.
Maybe when you snatch up more than one person?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So what do you think, John? Obviously there's simplicity is valued for its utility, because it can yield results presumably more quickly and easily. But do you think we've strayed too far into the idea that everything has got to be simple to a point of like dumbed down? Do you think that there's a lack of aspirational complexity?
I think one of our great powers is to complicate everything. Look at some of the academic subjects. I mean, they're so complicated. You literally have to spend 10 years wrapping your head around them. You have to become the subject to. They're very complicated, you know.
Well, it creates a sort of divide between the people in that field and then the
Well, there's a function.
simpletons. Yeah.
It's like a device used, or complexity is sometimes a device used to obfuscate something. In the same way, people can use craziness as a way to escape the reality of what's going on. I think it's probably
Something in that. Yes, that's right. You can hide simple truths within complex lies. That's a good one. I just thought of that. Um, so what about, like, we talked about the simple life, but what about other forms of life?
well, that's a pretty complicated field, isn't it? Biology. Like if you go and study any of the sciences academically, any field is incredibly complicated. You've got to spend decades learning it to be like regarded as knowing anything about it, and then you've got to practice it for a long time too. The physical world is vast. I mean, it's much more vast, I think, than we can comprehend. We try to fit it inside our heads, but just through its sheer size, it seems enormously complex to us. But I think, there's some quite wise people have pointed out that in operation it's quite simple, nature. Our theories to explain it are really like if you study quantum physics, that's based on the statistical mathematics, and it's very complicated. There's not many people that go there or bother to go there.
Have you seen spooky action at a distance?
Going on now. So our concept-based, language-based way of thinking and communicating with each other probably doesn't help at all in keeping things simple when it comes to explaining the world. But if you look at other animals, they don't have the baggage. They don't carry around the baggage we do as far as our constant
Self-talk.
yeah, well, just our analysis, our plan, our big plans, all of our emotions and what they trigger as far as our conscious thinking goes. Animals don't seem to have that baggage.
Yes, if they have a fight, it's resolved quickly, and they're not torturing themselves over thinking about the outcome of something. They just do it.
Very in the moment. All of our thinking just takes us out of the present. And in fact, you can't have a thought without being taken out of the moment. This is why clearing your mind in some form of meditation and presence of mind is a really great thing to do. Because as soon as you start having a thought, you lapse into the past. Thinking takes time. So you completely remove from the moment as soon as you're engaged in a thought process. You're conceptualizing in your mind. And we spend a lot of time doing it. And I find it incredibly difficult to quiet my mind down. Often it drives me crazy. Last night I was up for hours. It just wouldn't stop.
So our consciousness is our blessing and our curse. We're able to carry out more complicated plans than animals, but at the same time we lose sleep over our inner dialogue.
Yeah, so I guess even though it's looked at as some kind of intellectual disability, to be simple, I think as we've found, it's actually a great thing I use it all the time. If I just think in recent times, I've had to deal with some problems that I haven't had to cope with before. It's like new territory for me. And I've been quite overwhelmed by the process. And I think it's been great for me to actually do that keep it simple thing and actually bring it back to basics and write down in point form. And I think writing is great. For me personally, it's a great help in simplifying my thoughts. I can sit there for hours and try and arrange my thoughts about something I'm having trouble with, but I can make huge progress if I take the time to actually jot those thoughts down. It seems easier to review them and to think about them when they're not rattling around inside your head.
It makes sense.
Yeah, journaling is a good thing.
What you were saying about the simplicity being a good thing, it kind of made me think of how Stephen King has used the trope before in The Stand and in The Green Mile, but the idea of intellectually impaired people being closer connected to some kind of
Special,
divine life force kind of energy or something like that. It's an interesting idea.
I think Stephen King might have some experience in the 12-step programs.
Oh, he definitely does.
Yeah, because it's a really big, they have lots of cliches to get you through the day. And keep it simple, stupid is one of their most powerful, and frustrating cliches, because you don't want to hear it sometimes when you're,
I recall an encounter with some guy in a bar once, and he had one of those ruddy faces that had presumably been shaped by decades of alcoholism. You know the type, the
hemochromatosis,
Is that what they
red
call it?
Skin and
the red skin, the bulbous noses, and
yeah.
but he said to me, "Don't talk about anything too deep or sad, then people won't get upset. Just keep it light, keep it simple." And at the time, I kind of looked upon him as some kind of simpleton, but I think looking back on it, maybe there was some kind of sardonic tone with what he was saying, maybe.
Yeah, it sounds like he was trying to share a realisation he'd had with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe he was putting it to good use in his own life, even though it mightn't have come across as being that powerful when he was just wanting to share that gift. I came across a guy yesterday. It was similar. He was riding past on a push bike and he just stopped because he took the opportunity to talk to me.
Yeah, no, but what did he say?
What did he say? He saw me there with a dog and he stopped and he just started talking to me, and he was a Jesus guy.
Oh, yeah.
Because those dudes will stop and talk to people, right?
Yeah.
But he was really cool. He obviously had a loop going in his head, but, with his scriptures and whatever, but he was still... he was great to talk to, actually. He asked me some difficult questions. Well, actually, he asked me if I had any questions, which is a weird thing to say to somebody that you don't even know, you never spoke to before. And I thought, oh, yeah, I got lots of questions. But I got into a conversation with him just about questions and answers, because it seems to me that everybody's got answers, but it's actually asking the right questions, which is the thing that'll actually give you progress in a lot of situations.
That's
you ask
interesting.
all the wrong questions and you're just going to go around in circles, particularly if you're problem solving or trying to, advance in some way. The right questions, and not the answers, but the questions are the key.
John, would you say that reality is more simple than we think or more complex? And it can be both as well.
Well, it depends what you mean by reality. Do you mean the physical world that we share, or the reality that the world everyone lives in? They're conscious, because to me they're two different things.
I guess the shared reality then.
And I don't think this is something a lot of other people think about, because I don't hear them talk about this. They'll talk about reality, but like, which one are you talking about? Because to me it's quite obvious that people live in their own worlds. We each have our own universe, and it's based on our perception. No one else has your perceptions. Similar, we all have a hearing and eyesight, and we're humans, right? We're the same class of being, but our experience is totally unique, and therefore our reality is totally unique. However, we share something. That's the physical world that we inhabit, that we move around in and we identify objects, and makes it all possible, the physical world. But they're two quite different realms. So what was your question?
Is reality more simple or more complex?
Well, as far as the physical world, like I was saying before, there's so much of it. And it seemed to be a very small bit made up of very small stuff. So that's complexity right there to start with. And if you look at our theories and theories of matter and chemistry and biology and life, this amazing thing that creates order out of, entropy, which is basically chaos and randomness. On that level, the physical world is complicated beyond comprehension, really. But then you look at the way it all works. as a process, and you see simplicity everywhere. The simple rules, things fall to the ground. They're pretty simple. Most things anyway. Some things go up though, balloons and whatnot. I think most of nature's laws are fairly simple, fundamentally. But when we try to explain them, that's when things. That's when you try to explain stuff with maths, it's going to get complicated. So I don't really know what the answer is there as far as
Quantization.
I will say in relation to health and well-being, I'd say my experience has been that keeping things simple has been the best way forward for me. I've had some nerve problems and stuff and offered all kinds of solutions by doctors and have had some procedures and stuff which didn't help. It seemed to make it worse, and was offered some other kind of surgical type solutions to stuff. I chose not to do that and to take a more simple approach and to try and just address my general well-being, exercise, diet, rest, or stress, and a kind of herbal remedies and natural remedies rather than surgical type options. And actually it seems like I've got through the worst of my problems with my neck over the last few years by just doing physio and looking after myself in a general way. So it's worked for me. Simple approach to medicine.
Well, there you go, folks. Have a think about that when it comes to how basic some of our needs can be. Clean water, clean food, fresh air, exercise, and making sure you're getting the right, nutrients, vitamins. It doesn't always have to be so complicated and so crazy.
Indeed. And on that note,
We will see you again after the break.
D minor. We'll be back soon.
Bon voyage.
Bye-bye.
Simplístico.
You're listening to People Powered Radio, proudly supported by the Community Broadcasting Foundation. The Community Broadcasting Foundation resources community-owned and operated media stations just like this one that connect people and tell vital, local stories so that we all enjoy a more vibrant, inclusive Australian culture and healthy democracy. Find out more about our work at cbf.com.au.